Hello everybody, welcome to the studio. My name is Mel and I'm really excited that we're going to paint together today. So we have our winter night sky tonight. Look at that, like we're getting a little bit of sunset glow, we're getting a little bit of the Milky Way, we've got all the stars in that deep dark night sky, and then we have our fun little pine trees, and we got to get good at painting those since we're coming up on the holiday season. I'm sure we'll be doing them a lot this winter. So if you ordered a kit, it has everything that you need to paint except for an old jar with some tap water in it to clean your brushes and some paper towels or an old washcloth to dry them with. You can turn your pizza box that everything came into a table easel and get yourself all set up. I'm going to go over the equipment we're using for folks that didn't order the kit, and let me show you what we've got going on today. This brush doesn't belong here. I was working on something else. We'll just get rid of him like it wasn't ever there. All right, so I've got my palette paper set up here with some white, black. This is a phthalo or a dark blue, and then a tiny bit of bright red. And you want it to be a bright red, not a magenta or a fire red, because then you'll end up with a little bit of a different color. So you want it to have more of a scarlet tone to it. And let me get our brushes out of the water. We've got a big flat brush that's about 3/4 to an inch. And then we've got our small sort of size 4 here, filbert or round tip brush. So you just need a smaller brush with a pointy tip and a big brush with a flat tip, and we should be good to go. So get yourself all set up. Oh, one more, my favorite power tool, my heat gun to dry in between layers. So grab a blow dryer or something. It doesn't have to be your fancy Dyson. You can just get your old little Conair out. It's okay. Something to blow dry everything. So get yourselves a drink, get yourselves a snack, get all set up. I am going to move the camera so we get a nice tight shot of our canvas and we'll get rolling. All right, get set up. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, we are all zoomed in here and ready to go. So we are going to do our background in layers. You can see that we've got this really dark, almost black sky up here at the top. Let me move that down a little closer so you can see everything. It's really dark. And then it gets down into this blue section and then almost this purpley, and then down into pink and our red here. So that's going to be our goal, is to do that first layer. So we're not going to get all of this nuance and dimension. That comes as we add the stars and we put in our Milky Way, this foggy mist rising up from the horizon there. So we're going to start down here with the red though, and we're going to need our big brush for that. And I am just going to come over to the edge of my red and pull a little away. I always get my paint from the edge of the puddle. That way, if I'm painting with a dirty brush, I don't get everything all mucked up. So just take a little bit away from the edge, not a lot there on that brush. And I'm going to come up just a couple of inches from the bottom of my canvas. We've got our foreground here, which is in silhouette. That's going to be in black. So I don't want to paint under that, but I want to make sure I come down low enough. So I'm just going to come up a couple of inches and draw the line that's going to be the shape of my hills. So you can have a lot of shape, you can have a little shape, but then I just take what's left on that brush. I want to pick up just a little more and sweep across so that this band is as tall as this brush is wide. See how it's just one swath there. And then I'm going to keep working my way up without picking up any paint. Just scrape out what's left in there. Once I've made it that far, I'm going to come over to the edge of my white. My brush is dirty. Just being careful coming to the edge. And right where my red stopped, I'm going to start sweeping in my white. And I'm just coming across side to side and working my way down toward that red. Sometimes I can give a little scribble across or even a little swirl and then work my way up. Do you see how I have an ombre going on there? It's darkest at the bottom, working its way up. It gets lighter. Grab a little bit more white. Start at the top here where I left off, and start wisping, sweeping back and forth, adding more white, working my way up. Some of that red is going to come into it, and that's okay. But see how I'm starting to create an uneven top here? That's what I want to do. Get a little more white. Now I know I'm moving quickly, but I need to work faster than my paint dries. And that's pretty important. So you can see I've not come quite, if I were to pick the halfway point between my ground and the top, it's about here. I'm not quite up to that halfway point yet with just that white. So you want your red down at the lowest part, bring that up, let it be uneven and a little streaky, and let things start to blend and become lighter as they work their way up. And this is light dancing off that night sky, so it's going to be uneven. It does not need to be perfect. Just adding a little bit more. There we go. I'm adding more white here to the edge, just little bits. And then I'm going to clean my brush. So just to recap, I'm not quite halfway from the ground to the top of my canvas. My darkest red is here at the horizon line, and it lightens up and goes from red to sort of Pepto-Bismol to more like cotton candy, and then down to that palest of pinks there. And then we'll give our brush a rinse. Now, when you rinse your brush, I should show you that in case we haven't painted together before. Just take your dirty brush and sweep the bottom of your jar or your cup gently. Just back and forth. Then I drag these bristles across the edge of the cup. That'll squeegee out any excess water. Take a look at it. If there's still some paint in there, give it another little couple sweeps on the bottom. Drag that brush. And then I like to either press mine into my paper towel or just sweep it to dry it off. Okay, so now we want to start working our way up with the blue. But we're going to come back in here again with some very clean, fresh white. And just above where that palest pink ends, I'm adding some white. Do not blend down into your pink yet. Add a band of white that's about 1 inch, maybe 2 tall. And then when you're out of paint, you can wisp right along where the white and the pink meet and sort of erase any line by blending it. Then I'm going to come over to that dark blue and grab just a little bit of it, just a touch. And you know the routine. Now where the white has ended, I'm leaving a gap. And I'm just spreading out my blue until there's none left. At that point, I'm just sweeping in small sections back and forth down to where the white is. And I can give it a little squiggle to help with that. Sometimes I stop and clean out my brush and take an empty brush across. That blending works better when there's just a little bit of water in my bristles and no paint, because then I can bring it down. And these colors are much brighter than what we're seeing in that original, and that's okay. We're just doing our first sort of little basic layer here. And when I add the second one, I tend to bring in a little bit more purple. So I'm going to keep going with the blue and just work my way all the way up to the very top. And it's going to look like a 4th of July popsicle for a few minutes, and that's okay. Once we get this layer dry, we're going to come back in and add some more depth and dimension. Add some more purple, add a darker bit to our blue, some black up here at the top to make it darker. We'll add some stars and of course this mist or Milky Way that's rising up. When we put that in on our second coat, that's when things get fun. So I'm not adding any more paint here, but I'm just bringing a little more of this blue down because I feel like it makes my heart happy, so I'm going to do it. Not too much. But there we go. So we just want one quick basic layer. And your blue is going to be really streaky. That's okay. It's the base coat. It's our foundation. We'll come in and add some more, va-va-voom to it in a minute. So I'm going to hit mine with my heat gun. Get yours finished, hit it with the blow dryer, and when you're ready, come back and we'll do that second coat and get all that dimension in there. All right, here we go. Things are dry. And our next goal is, we have this sort of basic sort of primary color, and we're going to stick with that, but we're going to build in some depth with some purple, moving up into that dark, deep blue, into that darkest blue. So I'm going to follow sort of the same process that I did before. But before I begin, I'm going to make a little bit of purple. So for this purple, I know I want a lot of white in it. So I'm coming over to the edge of my white and picking up about the size of a green olive. And this is how I drop my paint off. I just put the corner of my brush down and turn it, sort of pressing that paint in. And most of it ends up on my palette and out of my brush. And then I'm going to come over and grab about half as much in blue and half as much in red. So 2 parts white to 1 part blue and 1 part red. And from there, I can make adjustments. So as I mix this, it's a little bit bluer than I want it to be, but I might want some of that shade. So I'm going to leave a little bit there, pick most of it up, move it over, and add a little bit more red to it. And that will give me more of a purple. So we can see the difference here now. Add a little more. There we go. So I'm going to go from that red pink into this purple, into this purpley blue, into that dark night blue. So I'm just going to sort of wring my brush out there and get it clean. So I've got a bluer purple, I've got a redder purple, I've got my red, my blue, my black, and my white. So I'm ready to go. Clean my brush off. Remember, sweep it, drag those bristles across the edge to get out the excess water. If it's still dirty, give it a little more. If you're finding a bunch of paint up here at the metal part of your brush, that's going to make things kind of oogie. So you want to pick up less. Your paint really shouldn't come more than halfway down your bristles. So start off in that same order. I'm picking up a little bit of red, coming back along this line, and you can see your red's going to be a little bit darker and deeper. Just getting a little bit of water on my brush to help move that around. And now I want to just use this sort of swirly motion to create an uneven edge here. I don't want things to be even in stripes. So as I swirl, I can create these different levels in height that are going to give me some visual interest. And then I just like to sweep those out so the swirls don't really stay in the texture of my paint. So get your brush rinsed and emptied. Whoops, not too much water like that. And sweep along, and that will help smooth out your paint. So from there, I'm going to move on to my purpley, my redder purple. And I'm coming in right about where we have that white spot. And I know that sounds crazy, but I did it so that we would have this area of distinction later. So once I've laid down my paint, I'm not going to go back for more. I'm going to clean off my brush, clean bristles and come back and do a little scrubbing and wisping so that these colors all start to sort of blend into each other with an ombre. I feel like I lost more pink than I wanted to, so as I'm working my way up, I'm going to stop and fix that. Just grab a tiny dot of red with a little bit of white and just come through underneath that purple and mix it in. You can even bring some of it up above that purple so that we've got sort of these layers and different levels of light here. A little more of my purple. And you can see what I'm doing now. I'm just working my way up and letting all these colors start to float together and blend together. Once I think I've got that layer where I want it, I rinse my brush and just wisp across. Now sometimes my brush is a little too wet and I leave some really streaky marks, like you can see here. Just wipe off my brush, get it dry, and wisp. Keep working my way up. So I'm about out of my reddish purple and I'm starting to work my way up to where that blue is. So I'm going to grab my bluer purple and put that above the reddish purple. And again, in some spots, I'm going to work my way down. So some of the darker color comes down, some of it stays up above. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. You just need a variety in the shading. So returning now to that bluer purple mix. I'm probably now about 3/4 of the way up my sky. Just wisping that in. And then I'm just going to switch to our blue. Place it above, sweep it down. Let things be uneven, and we're going to take our blue all the way to the very top. All the way to that top edge. And work that down. Now, once you reach this point, we have one more thing to do. And that is grab just a tiny bit of black while that blue is still on our brush. And coming across, I'm just going to paint that black right across the very tippy top of my canvas. And wisping and sweeping, bringing some of that darker blue down. Now, it isn't going to look like this one yet. We still have stars to add and our wispy fog light business coming up there. But as long as we don't have complete stripes like a box of rainbow sherbet, we're okay. We just want to go from our bright red into our pink to our purple to our blue to our deep blue black there. So I'm going to let you get to this point, and once you do come back and see me, we are going to splatter some stars on our painting. So I'll see you when you're ready. You still with me? Hopefully that didn't stress you out too hard, and your background at this point should be dry. We're going to do our first layer of stars on our background, and I want to bring this completed one forward so you can see. We have so many different sizes. The first thing we're going to do is do a splatter where we get all this fine spray of dots. Once that's done, we're going to come through with our fingers and some watered down white and create our galaxy mist here. And then once it's all done, we'll come back in. We can do another layer of splatter, or we can just intentionally put larger stars, and that will give us that depth and dimension we're looking for. Okay, so let's start with some splatter. First of all, I would recommend that you lay your canvas flat on the table for this section. I'm going to leave mine vertical so that you can see what's going on. But it might be easier for you if you lay things flat. Now, you can use whatever size brush you want. I'm going to use my big brush, but I'm just going to take it nice and clean and move a little bit of white paint away to the edge. And then dipping my brush bristles in there, I want to add water until this becomes the consistency of skim milk. If it has any viscosity or thickness to it, when we splatter, we're going to get these strings of paint rather than the fine spray that we're looking for. So you want it to be really drippy. If you were to lift up your palette, it should drip. And I keep working it until all the little lumps are out. Then I just sort of tap off my brush here a little bit to get any excess. And I'm going to grip it right there at the ferrule where the metal meets the wood or the plastic. I'm going to use my finger as the trigger, and I'm going to pull the bristles back toward me and then release. And you can get a little closer or a little further away and start wherever you want and work your way around. I'm going to reload a little bit here. I keep less stars down below and more up above. You can get really close, just make sure you're not letting those bristles slap that canvas. And you can put in as few or as many as you want. I like to get into some sections and make them really dense. Like, ooh, that got a little crazy. If that happens and you don't want it there, just take a little piece of your paper towel and dab at it. Because it's so wet, it should just sort of wick right up on the edge of the paper towel. But I'm just putting in as many stars as I like. And I'm going to add more later because I really like stars in this painting. But I think that is pretty good. Let me move it forward so you can get a better view. See all my stars? Okay, get your stars done. Get yourself cleaned up. And once your stars are dry, so hit them with the blow dryer, we're going to come in and work on our mist. I'll see you in just a minute. Now that our stars are dry, we can come in and add our sort of misty light that's coming up from that horizon. So you can see it angles up to this top left corner down to just past center here on the horizon. And then we've got a few little sections that just sort of branch off. So to do that, I'm going to keep with my large brush and my watered down white paint, the same stuff that we used to splatter. And very lightly, using very little, I'm just going to draw a line that follows the rough direction I want to go. And from there, I immediately try to start tapping out this line, both with my brush and my finger, because I don't want this to dry before I can get to it. And then there's just like this line going down the center of my painting. But now I can just use my brush, sort of smudge it out, and then I just use the pad of my finger and also smudge it out. This is going to be our faintest layer. You can see I'm starting to move it out and about. I want those edges to just sort of vanish or disappear a little bit. So I just keep patting. You can even dip your finger in the paint, that watered down paint, and just start tapping it through as well. But the finger painting, I think, gives us sort of the most organic shape that we can get when we do something like this. Just let it tap out. We're going to add more white to some sections to make it lighter and brighter. So some of them I'm just swirling and smudging and letting it get really faint This is our faintest layer. We'll brighten it up as we work our way through. If you need to, pause for a second, make some more of that runny white, and take your time. You just want a thin layer here that we've got the ability to add to. It's hard to take away in this sort of situation, but we can add to things. See how I just sort of drop it off with that brush and then come through, giving it a smudge and a tap. And up close, it just looks like a lot of fingerprints. But when you step back, it really does look like a mist. So I'm just working little sections here, putting it wherever you think you're going to want it. You can just bring it down in a single angle. You can let it sort of move out in this misty fashion like I am. See how that swirling smudge really moves that out, gets it faint. So we get almost our faintest sections there. Just barely there. It's still translucent. That's how we build up dimension without working really hard. In quick little layers. Just keep tapping. Little sections, add that stuff down and move it around. Now, I am pretty happy with this first layer. It does not look as complex or dimensional as our finished one. You can see everything is pretty translucent. And at this point, I want to start adding more. So I'm going to use my fingertip, pick up just a little tiny bit of white, maybe even a little of that watery stuff so I can get sort of a medium consistency. So a little bit of white that's a little thicker than what we were using, but not quite plain white paint yet. And moving through, almost like I'm painting clouds or smoke. I'm just tapping, and if I get any, strong lines that I'm not happy with, I just give a little smudge or a swirl. And this is where artists tell you, you just have to trust the process. If we keep building up, think of it like a soup. When you're creating a soup or a stew, you season in layers. So when you are sauteing the vegetable, the onion, the garlic, the carrots, the celery, whatever you're putting in there, you put in a little salt and pepper and, whatever other favorite seasonings you use. And then when you cook the meat, you season the meat, and we do everything in layers. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm just using a little bit of a thicker version of my white, just adding a little more white to that watered down stuff so that it's just a little bit more opaque, but not quite pure white yet. And if I get out of hand, I just smudge it out. And follow that flow of my Milky Way or mist here. And as you start to build it up, you'll get a little braver and you'll start to feel a little bit safer and more secure about adding more white, which is what I'm doing here. Bringing it down to where it's rising up off that horizon. Smudge, tap, smudge. And keep working your way up. Some bits can be nice and bright, right? And others are going to be much more translucent. So this part you could take forever with. And you really just keep going until you're happy with it. But if I can give you one piece of advice, it's just little bits at a time. Stand up, step back, put a little distance between you and the piece. That's always important. It's really important to give yourself a little bit of distance so that you can get some proper visual perspective. And keep working your way along here. Moving your way up. And we just keep going until you're happy. So I'm actually pretty happy with this. I know that once my trees are in, I can come back and add some white up here if I need to. So I don't want to do anything that's going to be hard for me to undo or change. So take your time, get as much as you like in, and then stop and take a break and let it dry. Once it's dry, we're going to come in and put in our trees. And then this thing goes pretty quick, we get to almost done pretty quickly. So I will see you all in just a little bit. Here we go. Our galaxy Milky Way is in. Remember, once those black trees are in, we'll have a better idea of how this is going to look in the final piece. So after I get those trees in, I'll decide if I need to add a little more pure white to brighten up some sections. I suspect we'll need to do that. One more little layer of white to come through and kind of bring that to a pop. But for now, we're going to focus on our trees. So I'm going to use my big brush with that flat edge. Got it clean and dry. And I'm going to grab some black paint here. And from the bottom, just fill in my land. I'm just sweeping back and forth, working my way up to that edge. And then I'll just go along the edge and create my ground surface. It doesn't need to be perfect because we're going to put trees all over it. And you can bring it up a little further, but trust me, it's one of those things. Once you get one side of the edge, then you got to do the other, and the next thing you know, your ground comes halfway up your painting. So go easy. And then we're going to decide where to put our trees. Now, if you want to know exactly how many trees are in this one, I'm going to count them for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Lucky number 13. You'll notice some are taller, some are super short. There's little bits of space in between trees so that they're not perfectly spaced across the whole thing. I like to put the tallest trees on the edge. So I'm just going to take my brush and use the skinny side. You can see I've got that skinny edge up and down. If I pull, it's going to give me a thin line. So I'm just going to use a really light touch, come just over halfway up my canvas and pull down a thin line. It's not even perfect. You can see it breaks. That's fine. Then I'm going to scoot over an inch or so, add another one. I'm just coming in wherever I feel like I should have some trees and putting in some lines. And that's all I need for there. So I'm going to set this brush to the side and grab my smaller one. So once you get all your lines in place, grab your small brush with a little bit of black paint. And we're just going to come to the top of the tree and we're just tapping. And I tap across that line to get rid of it. And then I move my way out to the right or left. Just little bits. And I'm just sort of using the brush, letting it pounce, bounce, pounce, come out to the edge, come across that center, back out the other way. And when I start to get past this very narrow top, I can switch back to my bigger brush. And I like to do that because it makes my work a little bit easier. I just start tapping down the center and coming out to the right or the left. Your tree can get really fat and wide, or it can stay narrow. It's entirely up to you. We are going to put a little bit of highlight, but for the most part, this tree is going to stay in silhouette, which, forgives a multitude of sin. So I just keep working my way down to the bottom and let it hit the ground. Now we can also go the other way. We can start at the bottom and work our way up. So this guy is really close next to it. Just working my way, tappity tap. Switch to the little guy. And I'm just tapping down at an angle in these really irregular messes. And I'm going to move this up close so that you can get a better view. But up close, these things look super duper funky. And yours do too. It's okay. But when you step back, the silhouette is what makes it. So from this distance, it looks like a tree. Get up close. Look at that. Just looks like a bunch of squiggly, messy lines stacked on top of each other. And that's exactly how we get a tree. So I'm going to keep working. I like to use the big brush and just use the corner of it for those narrow sections. So you'll see me doing that. If you're comfortable, do what you're comfortable with. So use the small brush for those top sections if that makes you feel a little bit safer about it. But remember, just tap down that middle and then jut out to the left or the right once in a while. Bring those down. If you've got a fan brush, you could use your fan brush. Fan brushes make it easy. And I find that the messier the brush tip is, sort of the better trees you get. When you have these clean, brand new brushes, you kind of have to rough them up to get a good tree out of them. But do not trip, my friends. Do not trip over your trees. Just keep going. Stand up, step back, get yourself a refresher on your cocktail or whatever it is you're enjoying this evening, and keep working your way through. Here we go. I think what I'm going to do is just keep tapping. I'm going to do this one more, and then we'll do this in time lapse so that you don't have to hang out the whole time. So, using the corner of my brush, I'm just tapping right down the center to mess up that line. Come out a little bit to the left, go back to the center, out a little on the right, and you don't want them to be symmetrical. Symmetrical is weird in nature, especially trees. They should all be just a little bit different. Just down the center, out to the left, out to the right. Work your way down. Okay, so from here, I'm going to finish mine up on this side, and when I come back, we are going to talk about our final few layers. We're going to add a little bit of highlight here on our trees, maybe deepen up our aurora or Milky Way or whatever this is a little bit more, and add some more stars. So we got a little bit of work left to do. Take your time, and I will see you when your trees are done and dry. So we are getting there. I mean, we look similar. This one just looks a little bit flatter. That's because we need to add a little bit, just a little bit of highlight or reflection on our trees. Add just a little more white to our Milky Way going on here, and add a few more stars to our sky. So let's start by adding our highlights. And to do that, let me move, actually, before we do that, let me move this one closer. Can you see there are just little, barely hits of light here in little different edges of those trees, and they just catch the edge of that silhouette and give them just a little bit more shape and definition. So I'm going to use my small brush and a little bit of white. Move that over. I don't need a lot. Grab a tiny bit of red. And I want to get a nice, soft, kind of cotton candy pink. And I'm going to just make it a little bit dusky with just a tiny bit. Can you see I just barely put a little tiny bit of gray into it? So there, just wipe any excess paint off. And what we want to do is look at the side of the tree that's facing the brightest side of the light. So if I start all the way over here on the right, it's just going to be these very little edges over here. And I want less than more. So I'm just barely tapping some onto those little top pieces of that tree. Can you see? Just barely. Let me do the next one for you. Just barely there on that left side. And I'm just tapping. We'll go do the next one. And I don't go down too far because this is all going to be in shadow, right? I mean, there might be a little bit that peeks through. So we can hit just a few little pieces. I'm going to keep this closer so you guys can see. Now, when I get over here to this center one, I might just need to do a little bit on each side, right? Because that light isn't going to hit this part of the tree, but it is going to hit those very edges. So I'm just barely tapping in little bits. So on this right side of the painting, we want to tap that in right there on the left edges of our branches. Now when we move over to the left side of the painting, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to start tapping in just little bits on the right side of the branches. And you don't need a lot, just tiny bits. Keep a little damp paper towel nearby if you feel like you got too much. You can always just take a damp paper towel and wipe it off. Then you can have a do-over. But just the tiniest bits. And this is what takes it from a flat silhouette to having just a little bit more shape and visual interest. That's what made Bob Ross so fantastic, right? Was he put those little bits of light into the most magical places. And that's what we're going to do. Just like that. Just those little bits gave it all that shape all of a sudden. And then you can even just do a few little wispy lines. There's barely any paint. Oh, that one had a lot of paint. So let me show you how to fix that. Take a little bit of a wet paper towel and just wipe it down. Now I put some over here. Another opportunity. And I'm just following that curve a little bit. Putting in a few lines so that it looks like a little bit of snowdrift there. Can you see that? Just barely. A little bit. To just create a little more highlight off our snowdrift there. But most of it is in shadow. So 2 things left. Once we get this done, let's review. You've got that little dusky bit of pink we're using on the side of the trees that's facing the light. The light's in the center. So on the right side of the painting, we're highlighting the left side of the tree. On the right side of the painting, we're highlighting the left. On the left side of the painting. Left side of the painting, we're highlighting the right. So remember, light's in the center wherever it glows out. Get that done. When you're ready, come back to me. We are going to add a little bit more light in our sky and some stars, and this thing will be ready to sign and hang up. All right, we are down to our last few steps. So one of the last things I want to do is just add a little bit more white and brightness. So I'm taking my handy dandy fingertip paintbrush, getting just a little bit of white on there, and I'm going to dab most of it off. And come along and just let some of that work its way through. My finger is constantly moving in one little section. Think about how air floats and gets lofty, right? Like when smoke is coming up off of a campfire. Some parts of it are going to be brighter. And just work your way up. Do little bits at a time. Like we did earlier. We're just adding little bits. Building up that dimension in little easy steps. Without having to get all crazy and technical about it. There we go. And I don't think I need a whole lot more than that. I mean, just a little tiny, it's like highlighter, right? That stuff that glows and gives you that shiny bits. You don't want to put too much on, or you look like you just had a nuclear radiation test. So just little bits. And see how deep that got all of a sudden? Just that little bit. Once you're happy with that, we can do the final step, which is adding our stars. So I'm going to take my small brush and get it nice and clean. And then I just sort of gently pinch those bristles and twist the brush so that I get everything nice to back to a nice, tidy, neat point. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of white and come around and start adding bigger stars in my sky. Some will be in clusters. But this last layer over the splatter that we did, that's what adds our dimension. And they don't have to be perfect circles. Not every star in the sky looks like a perfect circle when you look at it. They twinkle. If you want, you could even create like a big glowing northern light here. So I say just make a bigger dot with a glob of paint there. And then you can pull down and up, left and right, and then a little X over it. And that can help make it, you know, kind of Christmassy or seasonal. And you can add as few or as many of these stars as you want. If you want to add your favorite constellation or your zodiac sign in here, do it. Do whatever makes you happy. But see, now we've got that depth and dimension there. It's pretty fabulous. It's pretty awesome. Look at our winter night sky. I am pretty crazy about it. So please, if you haven't yet, come join us over on Facebook at my Facebook group, Paint with Mel and Friends. There you'll find other artists that paint with me, and we share pictures of our work and just sort of cheer each other on. It's kind of a mutual admiration society. And you can also find me over on TikTok at Paint with Mel, Instagram, and Facebook. If you use the hashtag Paint with Mel, when you put up posters or when you put up posts with pictures in them, then they'll find their way to me, and people searching for our work can also celebrate it and share in it. Thanks so much for painting with me, you guys. We've got a lot of winter trees coming up, a lot of these pine trees. So practice with them. If you need some help, drop me a note. Maybe I'll do an extra tutorial on them. And on that note, if there's anything that you want to see, like one of my members, and hello to my Paint with Mel members, Pat sent me a message saying, hey, can you do an Irish countryside with a little cottage with a red door and some sheep? So Pat, I'm working on one as we speak. It should be out in the next few weeks. But if there's something that you want to see, send me a note. And I will try to do my best to create a painting inspired by your suggestions so that we can put things in the collection that you want to paint. So I hope you had a good time today. It has been my pleasure painting with you. Until I see you the next time, you guys, be well. Take it easy. Bye-bye.